There's something almost magical about the moment when you stop forcing everything to work out. When you finally release that death grip you've been holding on your life, your relationships, your dreams. It's like you've been swimming upstream your entire existence, fighting against an invisible current, and then suddenly you realize you can just turn around and let the river carry you. Most people never discover this secret. They spend decades pushing, controlling, manipulating every outcome, convinced that if they just try harder, plan better, force more, everything will fall into place. But here's what nobody tells you. The very act of gripping so tightly is what's keeping everything stuck. Your desperation is the dam blocking your own flow. Think about it. When was the last time something beautiful happened in your life that you didn't orchestrate? When did something wonderful surprise you? Not because you earned it or strategized for it, but because you simply allowed space for it to emerge. These moments exist, but they're rare because we've been trained to believe that letting go equals giving up, that relaxing our control means accepting defeat. But what if I told you that everything you've been struggling to achieve, everything you've been forcing and fighting for, has been waiting for you to simply get out of your own way? What if the breakthrough you're desperate for isn't on the other side of more effort, more planning, more control, but on the other side of surrender? This isn't about being passive or lazy. This isn't about sitting back and hoping the universe drops miracles in your lap. This is about understanding a fundamental truth that changes everything. The energy you spend trying to control outcomes is the same energy that could be flowing toward creating them naturally. And when you finally understand this distinction, when you finally let go of the wheel just enough to let life surprise you, everything starts moving. You've felt this before, even if you didn't recognize it. Remember that job opportunity that showed up right after you stopped desperately searching? That relationship that blossomed when you finally stopped trying to force connection? That creative project that came together effortlessly once you stopped overthinking every detail? These weren't coincidences. They were glimpses of what happens when you align with flow instead of fighting against it. But here's where it gets interesting. Letting go isn't just about external circumstances. It's not just about releasing your grip on outcomes in the world around you. The deepest transformation happens when you let go of the internal struggles, when you stop fighting against parts of yourself you've been trying to change, fix, or improve. When you stop forcing yourself to be someone different and start allowing yourself to be who you actually are. Most of us are walking around carrying invisible weights. Old versions of ourselves we think we should have moved past by now. Emotions we think we shouldn't still be feeling. Dreams we think are too impractical or too late to pursue. Aspects of our personality we've been trying to smooth over or hide. We're constantly at war with our own authentic expression, convinced that if we just discipline ourselves enough, we can become this perfect controlled version of who we think we should be. But perfection isn't the goal. Flow is the goal. And flow doesn't happen when you're constantly correcting, adjusting, and forcing yourself into a mold that doesn't fit. Flow happens when you stop resisting what is and start working with the energy that's already there. When you stop trying to be someone else and start being more fully yourself. This shift changes everything because when you're not spending all your energy fighting against your own nature, that energy becomes available for creation. When you're not constantly trying to control every variable, you become sensitive to the subtle currents that are actually guiding you toward what you're meant to experience. When you stop forcing doors that aren't meant to open, you start noticing the ones that are already unlocked. The irony is that letting go actually requires tremendous strength. It takes courage to release control when everything in your conditioning tells you that control equals safety. It takes wisdom to recognize the difference between giving up and allowing. It takes trust to believe that there's an intelligence larger than your own personal will that's working on your behalf. And this is where most people get stuck. They want the benefits of letting go, but they're terrified of what might happen if they actually do it. What if nothing happens? What if they end up disappointed? What if letting go is just another way of saying they're not strong enough to make things happen? These fears are understandable, but they're based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what letting go actually means. Letting go doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming responsive instead of reactive. It means learning to sense the difference between inspired action and desperate action. It means trusting that when you align with your authentic energy, The right opportunities, people, and circumstances will naturally be drawn into your experience, not because you've earned them through struggle, but because you've created space for them through presence. When you operate from this place, work doesn't feel like work anymore. Relationships don't feel like projects you need to manage. Creativity doesn't feel forced or calculated. Life starts feeling more like a dance than a battle. You're still taking action, still making decisions, still moving toward what you want, but the quality of that movement is completely different. There's an ease to it, a natural rhythm that feels sustainable instead of exhausting. This is what flow actually looks like. It's not about everything becoming effortless, but about effort feeling aligned instead of resistant. It's not about never facing challenges, but about approaching challenges from a place of curiosity instead of desperation. It's not about controlling outcomes, but about trusting your ability to respond to whatever emerges. But here's what nobody talks about. The transition from forcing to flowing isn't always smooth. There's often a period of discomfort, a space between letting go of the old way and fully trusting the new way. During this transition, it can feel like nothing is happening, like you're floating in limbo, no longer pushing, but not yet experiencing the flow you've been promised. This is actually the most crucial time because this is when most people panic and grab back onto control. The temptation during this in-between space is to assume that letting go isn't working, that you need to go back to forcing, that this whole idea of flow is just wishful thinking. But this transitional space isn't emptiness. It's potential. It's the pause before the breakthrough. It's the silence before the music begins. And learning to be comfortable in this space, learning to trust the process even when you can't see the results yet, is what determines whether you'll actually experience the transformation you're seeking. Because once you make it through this transition, once you learn to let go without giving up, once you discover how to surrender without becoming passive, everything changes. Opportunities start appearing that you never could have planned for. Solutions emerge that you never would have thought of. Connections form that feel destined rather than manufactured. And most importantly, you start feeling like yourself again. Not the version of yourself you think you should be, but the version you actually are when you're not trying to be anyone else. This is when life starts flowing, when you stop swimming upstream and discover that the current was always trying to carry you exactly where you needed to go. The moment you truly let go, something extraordinary happens. Your nervous system stops living in a constant state of alert. Your mind stops spinning through endless scenarios of what could go wrong. Your body stops carrying the tension of trying to hold everything together. And in that space, in that sudden stillness, you remember what it feels like to breathe again. But this isn't just about feeling better. This is about accessing a completely different way of being in the world. When you're not using all your energy to control, manipulate, and force outcomes, that energy becomes available for something much more powerful. It becomes available for presence, for intuition, for recognizing the opportunities that were always there but were invisible while you were focused on making things happen your way. You start noticing synchronicities that would have passed you by before, conversations that lead somewhere unexpected, invitations that arrive at the perfect moment, ideas that emerge from nowhere and feel more true than anything you've ever planned. These aren't accidents. They're what happens when you're finally tuned into the frequency of your actual life instead of the frequency of your resistance. And here's where it gets really interesting. The things you were trying so hard to force, they either show up naturally in a completely different form, or you realize you never actually wanted them in the first place. That relationship you were chasing becomes irrelevant when someone who actually sees you appears. That career path you were forcing yourself down loses its appeal when work that genuinely excites you emerges. That version of yourself you were trying to become feels unnecessary when you discover who you are, when you're not performing. This is the paradox nobody talks about. The moment you stop needing something to happen, you create the conditions for it to happen naturally. Not because the universe is rewarding you for letting go, but because letting go removes the energetic barriers that were preventing it from happening in the first place. Your desperation was the static interference. Your control was the wall. Your forcing was the resistance that was actually creating more resistance. And when you remove those elements, what's left is pure creative potential. What's left is the raw material of possibility that can shape itself into forms you never could have imagined. But let's be honest about what this actually requires. Letting go isn't a one-time decision. It's a practice. It's something you have to choose again and again, especially when life gets uncertain, when things don't go according to plan, when your old patterns try to reassert themselves. It's learning to catch yourself in the moment when you start gripping again and gently returning to the space of allowing. Some days this will feel natural. Other days it will feel impossible. There will be moments when letting go feels like the most obvious thing in the world, and moments when it feels like you're being asked to jump off a cliff without knowing if there's ground below. Both of these experiences are normal. Both are part of the process. The key is understanding that letting go isn't about becoming detached from life. It's about becoming more deeply engaged with life as it actually is, rather than life as you think it should be. It's about falling in love with reality instead of staying married to your expectations. It's about discovering that what's actually happening is often more interesting, more beautiful, more perfectly timed than what you were trying to make happen. When you live from this place, decisions become easier because you're not fighting against your own instincts. Relationships become more authentic because you're not trying to control how others perceive you. Work becomes more fulfilling because you're following genuine interest instead of obligation. Creativity becomes more alive because you're not censoring every impulse before it has a chance to emerge. You stop asking, "How can I make this happen?" and start asking, "What wants to happen through me?" You stop trying to bend life to your will and start discovering what emerges when you align your will with a deeper intelligence that's always been guiding you. This isn't mystical thinking. This is practical wisdom. When you're constantly fighting against the current, you exhaust yourself and make very little progress. When you learn to read the current and work with it, you can travel much further with much less effort. The river was never your enemy. Your resistance to the river was the problem. And once you understand this, once you really get it in your bones, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. You'll look back at all that struggling, all that forcing, all that exhausting effort to control outcomes, and you'll see it for what it was: a misunderstanding, a belief that you had to fight for your place in the world, instead of trusting that your place was already waiting for you. Everything you've been seeking, everything you've been working toward, everything you've been hoping for, it's all still available, but it's available through flow, not force, through allowing, not controlling, through trust, not fear. The river is still there. It was always there. The only question is whether you're ready to let it carry you home.